Hello there friends, it's Ashley here from the Loopy Lamb and theloopylamb.com, and today I'm going to be sharing my step-by-step tutorial on how to make this cute little Paulie pumpkin. Now this is a relatively easy pattern and it's quick to make, and I've designed it in order to minimize sewing. So we're not going to be needing to sew on any extra parts. However, there is some embroidery involved in adding the face. To follow along with today's tutorial, you're going to need worsted weight yarn in 3 colors. Today I'm using yarn from We Crochet. This is their Bravo worsted weight line, and I'm using the colors brown, brindle, and pea pod. Now, in the original pattern, I do use the color sienna, but we're going to be using this brindle color today in hopes that it's a little easier for you to see the stitches that will be working in the brown. You'll also need a 3.5mm or E crochet hook. I'm using this Furls Odyssey crochet hook. And you're going to need a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle, some polyfill stuffing, a stitch marker, 2 10mm safety eyes and the backs for those. And for embroidery, you're going to be needing some black embroidery thread and some white embroidery thread as well. So if you're ready to get started, please hit that like button and please consider subscribing to this channel. I'm going to clear off my workspace here and we'll get ready to get started making our own little crochet pumpkins. So to start with our pumpkin, we're going to start by crocheting the stem of our pumpkin. And I'm using this brown color for my stem. And we're going to start by making a magic circle or adjustable ring. To do that, we're going to wrap the yarn around our fingers like this, take our crochet hook, and then we're going to pick up the second strand going under the first strand, picking it up, twisting it, and picking up that working yarn and pulling it through the loop we created. If you need to see a slower tutorial for that, you can find that here on the channel for a full tutorial in slower motion for the magic ring. So now that we have our magic ring, we're ready to start with round 1. And now we're going to place 6 single crochets into the magic circle. So we're going to insert our hook into the ring, yarn over and pull up a loop. We're going to yarn over and pull through both loops on our hook. And that is your first single crochet completed. And I'll show you that again. We're going to insert our hook into the ring, yarn over and pick up a loop. You should have 2 loops on your hook. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through both loops on our hook. And that's your second single crochet completed. We're going to do this now 4 more times. So now that I have my 6 single crochets completed, I'm going to pull that circle tight. And I'm ready to start round 2. Now make sure you've got your stitch marker handy because we are going to be using that in just a moment. Now for rounds 2 and 3, they are worked the same way. We're going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So we're going to work into that first stitch under both loops. And we're going to single crochet. Oops. I only picked up 1 loop there. So we're sorry about that. We're going to go into that stitch, pick up both loops, and single crochet. I always struggle with that first stitch. And now that we have our first single crochet completed, we're going to place a stitch marker into that stitch because we always want to keep track of the first stitch of our round. And now we're just going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch around. You should still have 6 stitches at the end of the round. So if you'd like to pause your video and finish this round, round 2, and then do round 3 in placing just 1 single crochet into each stitch around, I'll meet you back here when we're ready to move on to round 4. So I'm about to do my last stitch of round 3, and I'm going to need to change colors before moving on to round 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop. And before I finish this stitch, I'm going to use the last yarn over to change colors. So I'm just going to lay the orange yarn over the hook. And I'm going to pull that through both loops there. And I'm ready to now move on to row 4. For row 4, we're going to place 2 single crochets into each stitch around, which is also called a single crochet increase. So we're going to do that into each stitch around. So going into that first stitch, we're going to single crochet and move up our stitch marker. Then we're going to do another single crochet back into that same stitch. Now I will, before I move on, I want to just note that I'm going to crochet over my tails at this point, and I recommend doing that as you're going for this round, because you're going to have a couple of tails here, and it will just help keep them secure as you move on, and you won't have any unraveling as you work. Okay, so I've got my 2 single crochets in my first stitch, and I'm going to place 2 single crochets into each remaining stitch around. At the end of this round, you should have 12 single crochets. So I just finished round 4. I have my 12 single crochets, and I'm ready to move on to round 5. For round 5, we're going to place 1 single crochet into that first stitch. Don't forget to move up that stitch marker there. And then you're going to work a single crochet increase into the next stitch. And just as a reminder, that's 2 single crochets worked into the same stitch. And now that is our pattern we're going to work around this piece. We're going to work 1 single crochet into the first stitch and a single crochet increase into the next. You're going to repeat that all the way around this piece, and at the end of the round you should have 18 single crochets. So again, 1 single crochet in the first stitch, 2 in the second. 1 single crochet in the first, 2 in the second. So if you'd like to pause your video here and meet me back here at the end of round 5, I'll show you what we'll be doing for round 6. For round 6, we're going to place 1 single crochet into that first stitch here. Again, moving up that stitch marker. And then we're going to work a single crochet increase into the next stitch. And now we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. So there's our first and our second. And now we're going to work a single crochet increase into the next stitch. We're going to repeat those instructions 4 more times. So those instructions again are 1 single crochet into the first and second stitches and a single crochet increase into the next. Again, 1 single crochet in the first and second stitches and an increase into the next. We're going to repeat this until we have 1 stitch left unworked, and then I'll show you how to finish off this round. So again, 1 single crochet in the first and second stitch, followed by an increase. So now that I've finished all of my repeats of 1 single crochet in the first and second stitches, followed by an increase, I have 1 stitch left to be worked here, and I'm going to place 1 single crochet into that stitch. At the end of round 6, you should have 24 single crochet stitches. And now we're moving on to round 7. We're going to work 1 single crochet into each of the first 3 stitches. Again, I'm just moving up my stitch marker here to mark that first stitch. And now I've got to work 2 more single crochets. So 1 single crochet in the second and third stitches. And then we're going to work a single crochet increase into the next stitch. And we're going to repeat this pattern all the way around our piece. It will be a total of 6 repeats. So we'll need to do 1 single crochet into the first, second, and third stitches, followed by an increase stitch into the next, right? And again, that's those 2 single crochets worked into the same stitch. So then we're going to work 3 single crochets, so 1 in each of the first 3 stitches, and a single crochet increase into the next. At the end of this round, you should have 30 single crochet stitches. So now that I've finished round 7, if you're wanting to match gauge to have your Paulie Pumpkin turn out the same size as my sample, you're going to need to do a gauge measurement at this point. And to measure your gauge, you're going to measure from across the widest point from the front loop to the front loop. You should never be measuring from the back loops. You should always be measuring from front loop to front loop. So in this, most people use inches here. So we're going to switch it over. And at this point, your piece should measure approximately 2 inches across at the widest point. Okay. So now for rounds 8 through 14, we're just going to place one single crochet into each stitch around. So if you'd like to pause your video and do rounds 8 through 14, placing one single crochet into each stitch around, I'm going to pause my video here and I'll meet you back here when we're ready to start with round 15. So I just finished my rounds 8 through 14 and I'm ready to move on to the next step. But before I do that, I want to insert my safety eyes into my pumpkin, and we're going to be inserting them into round 9 with 3 stitches in between them. So we can find round 9 easily by identifying where our first round of orange stitches are, because we know that we changed colors to orange in round 4. So this here is our round 4, and we're going to count up. I like to just use the ridges because we know we're going to be inserting those safety eyes into those actual stitches where the ridges are. So there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so I found round 9, and I'm going to insert my safety eye anywhere into round 9 there. Okay, and then I'm just going to count over 3 stitches, 1, 2, and 3, and in that 4th stitch I'm going to insert my second safety eye. Now I'm going to put the backs onto the eyes. I'll turn that inside out so you guys can see that a little easier. I'm just going to put those backs on and push them until they're tight and they've clicked into place. And so that's what our pumpkin should look like at this point. And now we're ready to move on to round 15. Now after round 15, we're going to be starting to stuff our pumpkin. So if you don't already have that handy, make sure that you grab it so you can have it handy when we will need it after round 15. So for round 15, we're going to start decreasing our pumpkin to close it up. And for this round, we're going to start by placing one single crochet into each of the first 3 stitches. So that's our first stitch, second, and our third stitch. And then we're going to do what's called a single crochet decrease. Now, when you're doing amigurumi, I recommend that you do the increases in the way that I'm about to show you, as it's called an invisible decrease, as it makes the decreases less visible. So to do that, we're going to pick up the front loop only of the first stitch, and then we're going to twist our hook a little to pick up the front loop only of the second stitch. We're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through 2. And that's your invisible decrease. And we're going to repeat this pattern around our piece for a total of 6 repeats. And at the end of this round, we should have 24 stitches. And I'll show you that repeat again. That's one single crochet into the first 3 stitches, followed by a decrease. And again, we're doing that invisible decrease. So we're going to pick up the front loop of the first stitch, pick up the front loop of the second stitch, yarn over and pull through both loops, then yarn over and pull through both loops. And that's your invisible decrease completed. So if you'd like to pause your video and do 3 single crochets followed by a decrease all the way around your piece, I'll meet you back here when we're ready to move on to the next round. So I just finished round 15, and I'm just going to take a moment from crocheting in order to start stuffing my pumpkin. Now, I personally like to use scissors. This isn't the safest way to do this, but you can use a crochet hook. I know that the polyfill sometimes has like those sticks for a stuffing tool, but I like to use the scissors to push my yarn tails into the stem. I hope you can see this on the camera. It's super hard because it's so little, but I use the yarn tails to stuff the stem. Okay. You can use stuffing if that's your preference. This is just what I like to do. I use the tails, gets them out of the way when I'm actually stuffing. So I'm hoping that you can see that, but I've used the scissors here to kind of just stuff them into the tail. And I find that using the tails kind of gives it a really firm stuffing, and it doesn't fall out as easily as using the actual stuffing, as I do find that as I add more, sometimes it can come into place, but by using these scissors and kind of just poking them into the stem, they don't go anywhere. But I'm going to start stuffing my pumpkin with some polyfill here. Now, when you're stuffing your amigurumi toys, I recommend that you stuff them firmly. They should feel almost like a ripe orange when you squeeze them at the time that they're done. You want to, there's a very fine balance between firm and overstuffed. So it does take some practice, but once you kind of figure out what works for you and your personal attention, it kind of becomes second nature. So I'm going to continue to add stuffing as I work. And as you can see, I'm kind of just poking my finger around in the stuffing. And what I'm doing is I'm not just compressing the stuffing together, but I'm also looking for little holes or air pockets in the stuffing to make sure that I have an even stuff. Anytime you have gaps in your stuffing, you want to fill those, because any gaps will eventually cause the stuffing inside to shift, and then your toy won't hold up as long and it won't look as well or as good for longer. So here's our pumpkin so far. We're moving on to round 16 now, and just keep that stuffing handy because we're going to continue to stuff as we work. So for round 6, we're decreasing again, and we're going to start off round 16 by placing 1 single crochet into the first stitch of the round. And then we're going to move up our stitch marker. Now we're going to do a single crochet decrease. And again, for all of our decreases, we're doing that invisible decrease. And now we're going to do 1 single crochet into the first 2 stitches. So 2 single crochets here. So there's 1 and 2, followed by a decrease. And we're going to do that again. We're going to do this 4 more times. So we're going to go 1 single crochet into the first and second stitches, followed by a decrease. 1 single crochet into the first and second stitches, followed by a decrease. We're going to repeat this all the way around until we have 1 stitch left to be worked. Right, so I've got my 5 repeats of those 2 single crochets followed by a decrease. I've got 1 stitch left to be worked, and what I'm going to do is place 1 single crochet into that stitch. At the end of round 16, you should have 18 single crochet stitches. And now we're ready to move on to round 17. If you'd like, you can add some more stuffing at this point, as I do recommend that you continue to stuff as you go. For round 17, we're going to place 1 single crochet into that first stitch. And then we're going to do a single crochet decrease into the next. We're going to be repeating this pattern all the way around our piece for a total of 6 repeats. And once again, that repeat is 1 single crochet into the first stitch, followed by a single crochet decrease. 1 single crochet into the next, followed by a single crochet decrease. At the end of this round, you should have 12 single crochets. All right, so I finished round 17. I've added some more stuffing to my pumpkin here, and I'm ready to move on to round 18. Round 18 is going to help us close off our piece, and we're going to be doing 6 single crochet decreases. My goodness, 6 single crochet decreases around the round. So we're going to do our first decrease here over the first and second stitches. I want to continue to move that stitch marker up. And we're just going to do 5 more of those invisible decreases around the piece. All right, so we've got our 6 decreases and we're ready to finish off our piece. I recommend when we're cutting our tail, we want to leave a long tail for shaping. I recommend at least 15 to 20 inches. More is better. You do not want to run out of yarn at this next point. So if you're not sure and 15 or 20 inches doesn't look like enough, cut a few more inches just to be safe. So I've cut my tail and I'm going to pull that tail all the way through that last stitch. So now that I've pulled my yarn all the way through the last stitch, I'm going to thread the tail onto my tapestry needle. And I'm going to move our stitch marker out of the way. And what we're going to be doing now is called an invisible, or I've also heard it called the ultimate finish. And we're going to weave our yarn tail through the front loops of the last round. And what that's going to do is help us close up that hole really cleanly. So again, we're just going to use the needle. We're going to pick up the front loop of each stitch and pull our yarn tail all the way through, repeating this in all 6 of the remaining stitches. All right, so we've gone through all of the loops here, and now we're just going to very gently pull that tight, and that closes up our hole. Now, if you do have, I'm going to pull mine just to accentuate it so you can see it a little bit. If you do have a little bump here, no worries, that's totally normal. We're going to fix that up in just a moment. So now that we have our guy closed up, we are ready to start shaping him. And the reason we have this huge tail is because we're going to use our yarn tail to shape the pumpkin. Now, we're going to take our tapestry needle and going through the center of our pumpkin, we're going to insert our tail right through the center of that last round. Okay. Then we're going to turn the pumpkin because we want our tapestry needle to come out at the base of the stem. So going up through the bottom. Now, if you have a longer tapestry needle than I do, that's usually very helpful. All right, so we've got it coming out. Again, we're wanting to come out right where that brown meets the orange. So we're going to pull that all the way through like so. And then I like to start between the face. And we're going to pull that a little bit. And we're going to take the yarn, lay it down the side of the pumpkin. And then we're going to insert our tail right back through that center we originally went into. But we want to move where we're coming out of at the top over a little bit because we're creating these indents, right? They don't all start at the same spot. So we want to move over a couple of stitches and come out again at the base of the stem. Now, when you're pulling, you want to make sure that the yarn that's going down the side of the pumpkin here lands where you want it to. And like my sample, I'll have it here. I have one that goes right down the center of his face. So I want that to be repeated here. And so now that I've got that where I want it, I'm going to pull that tight. And you can see that I'm starting to get those indents. Kind of hard to see on the camera, but you're starting to get the indents. So now that I've come out this other side here, I'm going to lay my yarn down where I want my next indent to be, down the side of the pumpkin, turn it over and go back through the center point in the bottom of the pumpkin. Turn your pumpkin back around and come out at a different spot, oops, at the base of the stem. We're just going to repeat this around our pumpkin until we have 6 indents. All right, now when you're doing your indents, you've got your yarn in there, you want to pull that tight. The tighter you do it, the more defined your indents will be. Just be careful not to pull so hard that you snap your yarn. I'm going to keep doing this around. And if you'd like to pause your video and do 6 indents in your pumpkin, I'll meet you back here and show you how we're going to finish off and move on to the next step. So I've done my last indent and I'm just pulling my yarn tail back down to the bottom of the pumpkin here. Now this is an optional step. You don't have to do this. I just personally like to tie a little knot at the base of the pumpkin in the bottom. I'm going to pull it into the toy to hide it. But I just feel like the knot is a little bit more secure than just weaving in my ends here, especially with all this tight shaping. So now that I've got my knot, I'm going to go back in through the center and just come out through any stitch in the top. And I'm going to pull that knot inside my toy. At that point, I can weave in my ends and finish off, and then I'm ready to move on to the next steps of our pumpkin. So for our next step here is we're going to be adding some facial details to our pumpkin. And this is completely optional. If you like it without the facial details, that's totally fine. But we're going to start off by creating this little V for the mouth. So I've cut a length of embroidery thread. I'm going to thread that onto my tapestry needle here. And I'm going to tie a knot in the ends. I'm going to double it up and tie a knot in the end of the thread. Right, there we go. We've got our knot. And now we're going to insert our needle into one of the stitches near the side or the back of the pumpkin. We want to make sure we're going through the whole of the stitch, not actually through the yarn, because we want to be able to pull that knot into our pumpkin. So I'm going to kind of aim my needle to come out just off centered to the left, to the right, but how do I describe this a little better for you? I'm going to come out in the front of the face, just to the left of the eye. Again, I want to come out through one of the holes in the stitches, not an actual stitch where I'm going through the yarn. Now that I'm out the front of the pumpkin here, I'm going to pull that tail into the pumpkin. If you have a little bit of tail left over, that's fine. You can tuck that in afterwards. So now we're going to create the V for the mouth. Now I like to come down 2 stitches from the stitch that I came out of. So you can see I've come out here, and I'm going to go down 2 stitches, and the 2 stitches will take me close to the center. Okay, so because this yarn is in the way, you can either go over top of it or off to the side of it, because we're going to make sure that we cover it up on our second side of the mouth. So I'm going to go into this stitch, and I want to aim my yarn to come out either in this stitch here, or if you want a really wide smile, you can come out this stitch here. So I'm coming out in the stitch on the opposite side of the face to where we came out the first time. We're going to pull that embroidery thread all the way through. And we're going to pull that tight. Now that we've come out this side of the face, we're going to go back down into that center stitch. And I like to come out in a stitch over off to this side of the face, again coming through the hole in the stitch, not through the yarn, and I'm going to pull that tight. And that is your little V smile. It's really simple. It's probably as basic as you can get for embroidery mouths. So now that I've done that, I'm just going to tie a knot, and I'm happy with my smile, so I'm going to finish this off. So I'm going to tie a couple of knots in my embroidery thread, going to go back into that stitch I came out of and pull it out, pull the needle out another part of the pumpkin so I can pull that knot into the pumpkin. Okay, if you have a little indent from where you pulled your embroidery thread in, just use the tip of your needle to fluff that back out. Now you can knot your embroidery thread and pull it through a couple more times to make it more secure. Mine's just going to sit on a shelf, so I'm happy with where it's at now. I'm going to pull this embroidery thread a little tight, and I'm going to cut close to the pumpkin, so that way the tail kind of snaps back inside the fabric. And if I can still see it, I'll use my scissors and just kind of push it in there so I can't see it anymore. And I'm going to do the same thing with any other tails of the embroidery thread that I can see. You can either use the tapestry needle for this, your scissors, whatever works without damaging your fabric to get those back inside. So there is our mouth, and we're going to move on to adding the whites of the eyes to our pumpkin. So we're going to be needing our white embroidery thread to add our eye details, and we're going to be holding it double. So we're going to repeat what we did with the black. We're going to thread it onto the tapestry needle and match up our ends and tie a knot. And just like we did with the mouth, we're going to insert our needle in through one of the back or side stitches. And this time we want to come out as close to the top of the eye as possible. Now the backs of your eyes can sometimes get in the way. That's okay. I'm going to show you what you can do instead. So this is as close as I can get to the side of my eye because of the safety eyes, or I'm coming in the bottom. You can do bottom or top. Just pick whatever's easiest for you to get your needle through. So I'm pulling that knot into my pumpkin. Now that I'm really close to the eye, I can just go back through that hole I was in and go sideways through the stitch. It's a little easier to do it this way because you can kind of almost get the needle in between the safety eye and the back because there's all that fabric in between. So now that I've come out close to the eye, I'm going to wrap the embroidery thread around the eye. And I want to I like to think of it as dividing the eye in half. So if this is the halfway point of like in the center of my eye, I want to meet that same point, but on the top of the eye when I'm going back in. So I'm going to insert my needle here. And again, you might have to insert it at an angle. Now, I know some people like to do this before their eyes are in, but this is my personal preference to do it this way because sometimes when you do your embroidery before you stuff your toy, your embroidery can be too tight and then you could actually damage your fabric. This way, it's a little bit more tedious. However, I know that whatever embroidery I put in is going to look as good as I expect it to be because my toy is already done and stuffed. So now that I've gone in through the top of the eye, I'm going to come out close to the center point of the top of the second eye and pull my embroidery thread tight. You don't want to do this too tight because you don't want it to disappear behind your eye. Just kind of very slowly finesse it so it lays next to your eye. All right, now I'm happy with that and I'm ready to move on to my next eye. And again, I'm going to lay this embroidery thread along the side of the eye and go in through the bottom center point of the eye. And I'm just going to come out in another stitch somewhere else in the face. If you can finagle your needle to come out the back or the side, that's great. But this is as far as I can get mine to go right now. All right, so now I've got my embroidery thread in place. I'm going to slowly tighten that up and use my fingertip to kind of get it in the place that I want it to. And there are your eyes. I think they're called moon eyes. I've heard them called. But I really like adding this little white detail because it kind of gives some personality to your eyes. So now I'm just going to finish off my embroidery just like I did with the black. And I'm going to finish this off and I'll meet you back here because we're going to be adding our curly Q to our top of our pumpkin. So I'll meet you back here in just a minute. So now that Paulie is mostly done, we're going to add a little vine that's a little curlicue off to the side here, just because it's fun and whimsical. So we're going to be needing our green yarn for our vine and your completed Paulie. So Paulie, in the top of the stem here, you can see the stitches in the stem, and I'm hoping that it's not too dark on the camera. I tried to choose a lighter colored brown for this. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what's called a front post slip stitch into the stem. So create a slip knot with your green yarn and just hold your yarn off to the side. You're going to take your hook and you're going to find one of the stitches somewhere off to the side of his face, right? So if you've got his face pointing towards you, turn it off to the right or the left, whatever your preference is, and find one of those stitches. You're going to insert your hook through the hole in one of the stitches and then push it out the other side. You're picking up the post of one of the stitches in the stem. Now put your slip knot onto your hook and then pull that through the stem. And then you're going to yarn over and pull through the loop on your hook. And that's your front post slip stitch. And that's going to attach the curlicue to his head so you don't have to sew it on. Now we're going to chain 6. So we're going to yarn over and pull through. We're going to do that until we have 6 chains. All right, so now that we have 6 chains, we want to make sure that the front of the chain is facing us, and we're going to place 2 single crochets into the second chain from the hook. The loop on our hook never counts as a chain, so we're going to count this as our first chain and this is our second. So we're going to insert our hook into that second chain, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, and then we're going to do that again, 2 single crochets into that same chain. Now we're going to work 2 single crochets into each chain across. So at this point we should have 4 more chains. Now I will note, if your slip stitch that you did in the front post there is big enough that you can work into it, you can work those increases into that slip stitch if you're able to. You don't have to. But if it's going to make your work hang off or be too kind of loosey-goosey there, then you can go ahead and work into that slip stitch if you'd like. Now, we're going to do a front post slip stitch into the next stitch directly next to where we attached. Yeah, that can be on the left, that can be on the right. It doesn't matter, whatever you can get your hook into. So for me, my next stitch that makes sense for me is the one to the left. So I'm going to, again, insert my hook into the hole of the next stitch, pick up the post coming out the other side, and then I'm going to yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull that loop through the loop on my hook. Okay, and that's going to attach your curlicue without any additional sewing. So I'm going to finish off here, cut my yarn, and I'm going to pull that all the way through. And now all that is left for me to do is weave in my tails. And that's how you make Paulie the Pumpkin. I hope that you enjoyed making your own Paulie Pumpkin. If you did, I'd love if you gave this video a thumbs up. And if you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing to this channel. If you enjoy free crochet patterns, please check out my blog, theloopylamb.com. Thank you so much for watching, friends. Happy hooking, and I'll see you next time.